Welcome back to SDG Live in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum. I'm Antonio Zappulla from Thomson Reuters Foundation, and I'm in the company of Shamina Singh of the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth and Cobb of HRC. And today we're talking about LGBT rights, because increasingly here in Davos we are seeing LGBT rights being discussed among corporates, among government officials, and really the issue is finally being addressed openly. I wanted to have a sense from both of you, starting from you, Ty, of how you've seen this issue growing on and being openly discussed on the agenda.
Well, this is the fourth year the Human Rights Campaign's been able to get involved and be part of a growing conversation here about LGBTQ rights. We've seen it grow from a pretty small breakfast to a much larger breakfast and more conversations, to a point even this week where we're seeing this on the actual schedule of the World Economic Forum in two different sessions. One that looked at gender and gender identity, and one later this afternoon that I think Shamina's headed to pretty soon, about out leadership and the power of being out as a corporate leader.
Shamina, how important is to be out at work?
Well, listen, first I want to thank everybody, and I'm really glad to be here as part of the SDG Live session. I think it's incredibly important to be out at work. I mean, and for me, I think the question is not about being out, but it's like, do you want to be yourself or do you want to be somebody else? And That's I think right. In a world where identity and inclusiveness and sort of being comfortable with yourself is such an important part of participating, I think that the notion of being anything else but yourself wouldn't feel right.
But are we talking in a bubble? Are we talking from a position of privilege? I mean, we work in societies that are inclusive. We work with companies that are inclusive. You work for Mastercard, you obviously work for HRC, I work for Thomson Reuters Foundation. What about those people that are not in such a position? And what can companies and governments do to make sure that they can also be part of this conversation and feel exactly the same way about?
Well, I would say that one of the great successes of last year was that international institutions like the World Bank and the UN have both appointed point people on sexual orientation and gender identity issues. And it's so important for here at the WEF as well to be talking about these issues, because the WEF, like the UN and like the World Bank, have influence to really change the shape of where we go as a world and as a society.
And I would just say, it's interesting that you would say, are we, how are we, what perspective are we bringing? And you, Thomson Reuters, Mastercard, because I actually think that these are companies like many other companies who are in a race and a war for talent. And so when you're trying to bring on the best people to work on an issue or work for your company, you want the best talent, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation. And the other thing I would say is, I think that these companies have an edge competitively, because if you're not innovating and if you're not bringing different voices to the table, that's not real innovation. And so I think that Mastercard, we're fortunate that we have visionary leadership, and it's a place that we can all be ourselves. But I actually think that this is an area, and I'd love to hear what they think, but I'd love to hear what you think, Ty, that this is an area I think where the private sector may have been a leader in some regard, and yep. I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Well, for sure. I mean, you had one of the low moments of last year was a bill in North Carolina that really excluded trans people from bathrooms that align with their gender identity. And what we saw going in to advocate and talk to the governor there is we could walk in and say 100 corporations are with us. They say this is bad for the state and bad for business. It makes it hard for them to be an employer in that state. And soon after those conversations, all of a sudden we were at 200 businesses were with us. And so business really played a role in making the case of why that was such a bad law. And at the end of the day, Governor McCrory got a vote out of office at the end of the year because of that bad decision.
A lot of things have changed under the Obama administration. I mean, the LGBT rights issue has been on the agenda. He's been a big champion of LGBT rights issues. Things are changing. What if there's going to be a U-turn? And what role companies should play to make sure that these rights are upheld?
So I think that, like I said, I think that the work of a Mastercard or the work of a private sector company is their motivation is different necessarily maybe from a policy motivation. So while we're supportive of all of the issues, when you have a base to make the best product, like when your motivation is around doing well and doing good, and your shareholders are watching, and your business makes a difference, and things like that, then you're motivated for talent. You're motivated to innovate. You're motivated for the best product, the best process. So I think again that in these situations, we'll continue to do the right thing around employees, around colleagues, around what's right for the company and what's right for the product.
And it's our expectation and our hope that that's what we continue to see as a private sector that really wants to keep its talent and recruit the best talent, that continues to contribute to making the case of why diversity is good and why inclusiveness is good for both a successful business, but it can also be applied to a successful economy.
So I've got a question for you both. I mean, in women's rights, the issue for many years has been quota versus non-quota. And I heard openly LGBT leaders saying, actually, we might need quotas for LGBTQ staff within companies. What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, I just know there's been so much power in having out leaders within companies that we are so excited to have folks like Shamina, so folks like Sandra, who spoke at a breakfast from Accenture earlier this morning, folks like that really representing the community and talking about why these policies are important, but also gaining allies and bringing allies in the corporate space that also support us.
And the other thing I would just say is that why this conversation is so important in a place like Davos, so why we're here to have the conversation, why I'm so glad we could be here to have a conversation at the SDG Live space, is because you get it's a very compressed time for different sectors of the world to actually come together and have very serious conversations, but the time compresses what you can say and what you can do. So it really, these conversations, you force decision to almost happen, because it's very rare to have, heads of companies in the same place with heads of government, in the same place with heads of organizations like the HRC. And I think back to last year when Vice President Biden was here in Davos, and he convened a roundtable with HRC on private sector leaders around LGBT inclusion. And it was such a validation of the work that had been done and the leadership from the highest levels. And I think that that's the type of thing that we can see is happening here, and I think that we'll continue to see. And that's why it's so important for people like Ty, for people like me, to show up, for people like you to show up in places like this, because what happens here a lot of times, we'll start to see the trend going from here out into the world, if you will, over the next 2 years.
Do you think it's still a divisive issue? Or you think that is not the case anymore? It's just a case of like catching up with all the time that's been lost?
Absolutely. I think we still have so much work to do. I mean, this is going to be one of our toughest years domestically in the U.S. on the state level. I think Texas alone has a dozen anti-LGBT bills being debated and discussed, and across the state we have battles like that. The conversations may be changing about what we're debating, but but equality is not here. We work every day and have to come here, and Shamina and I have to talk, and we have to talk to our friends elsewhere, and we really have to think about what's in front of us, because the challenges are still immense. And that's just talking about the U.S. When you go outside the U.S., tremendous challenges people face, from criminalization in over 70 countries to extremists that we run into from places like Bangladesh to even in the U.S. in Orlando this summer. I mean, the world is still incredibly complicated, even though we've made gains. Now we have to protect those, and then the debate has changed, and we have to be engaged in that new debate.
But the other thing I would just say is that I think that why it's so important also to talk here about the Sustainable Development Goals and why we're sitting at the SDG Live is because I think this is a unique moment in the history of our world, in the sense that the Sustainable Development Goals offer an opportunity to organize, frankly, the entire world around a set of values.
And it's 5 and 10, which is, is pretty much on point.
The 5 and 10, I mean, yeah, exactly. So there are ones specifically related to inclusion, definitely. But the notion that you have a set of principles that the world is organizing around, that companies are incorporating into their business models, that nonprofits have a way to hook in, that we have a way to have a conversation about this, is enormously powerful. And I think that's why SDG Live and the work of the Sustainable Development Goals, both here, but from now until at least 2020 is going to be a tremendously exciting time. So it allows us space to have these conversations everywhere.
And then go take action.
And go take action.
So if we want to close with a message of hope, can you mention one thing that gave you hope and that gives you hope that things are going to get better?
Well, I mean, I just have seen such incredible rallying of support in the last several months in the LGBT community about creating a stronger grassroots network and being engaged politically and really fighting at the both state and federal level, that I'm excited about what, when the community gets energized, it can do, because we've seen it do so much so already.
Yeah, and I would just say, hope I love the word hope, but for me it's about work too. And so I think the thing that I'm really focused on is about the theory with the practice, so execution. So I'm very hopeful that our communities will stay engaged and even more people will come in, because the stakes are too high and the time is now.
Fantastic. Thank you both for your time, and
Thank
stay
you.
tuned with SDG Live.